supporting a warm, ice-free coastline with resources to sustain a lot more life. Though experts have, of course, debunked its imaginative suggestions and downplayed its significance ever since. Yet while most have general faith in the map-making of modern experts, it may be significant that the actual satellite images of what officials claim is a fully explored continent are actually composited together in a mosaic with a gaping hole in the middle around the South Pole. This is supposedly the truest picture of Antarctica that we're given, courtesy of the NASA Landsat program, which admittedly continually replaces and edits the composite, including when whiteout strikes. So the question that remains is, are we seeing what's really there? These satellite images are often stunning and give us a photorealistic picture of our planet, but like a video game with convincing graphics, satellite images are still only a representation of what's really there. They have flaws, and like all maps, the images simply aren't the actual territory. That may seem like a nitpicky point, but it's an important distinction to make, especially when we see large portions of what look like painted over or blurred out areas of the continent where bases are supposed to be located. Considering even super secretive Area 51 shows up pretty clear on Google Earth, you have to ask yourself, what's really in Antarctica that in 2017 we still supposedly don't have sophisticated enough technology for the general public to see it? Investigations that West Antarctica and East Antarctica are actually two continents separated by an under-ice channel have largely been upheld. The Transantarctic Mountains and the chain of mountains up the Palmer Peninsula connect with the Andes Range, nearly touching South America where they were once connected by a land bridge. The questions began as soon as Antarctica was quote-unquote found. Have they, or will they, unearth something significant from humanity's past? Despite being told the entire continent is basically an icy, barren wasteland where hardly anything could survive or thrive, with no native human population other than visiting scientists.
Freezing wastes without people, without life, without vegetation. Nature's most formidable challenge to man.
Earlier reports show this is simply not the case.
All the way back in 1893, Captain Larson reported discovering petrified wood and worms on Seymour Island, as well as a captivating area with dozens of clay balls placed on top of what looked like pillars, which had the appearance of having been made by the hand of man. But these were later dismissed as basalt that happened to collapse into the appearance of carefully sculpted clay balls on top of pillars. Between 1928 and 1930, then Commander Richard Byrd completed the first of 5 major modern expeditions to explore the Antarctic, and right away his team were captivated by evidence that there had once been a warmer climate while they were surveying vast tracts of otherwise icy land at the bottom of the earth. This expedition, which cost $400,000, was financed by Edsel Ford and John D. Rockefeller Jr., among others. A 1930 article on Byrd's first mission noted, quote, "They expect in time to solve what is perhaps the world's greatest mystery, the existence of extensive vegetation of the vast uplands near the South Pole thousands of years ago, noting sufficient geological evidence to prove that at one time Antarctica was once warm enough to support at least a rich vegetable life." In 1947, the U.S. Navy claimed they found a place they named the Bunger Oasis, though it may have been explored earlier. The Soviets established a research station there during their expedition in 1956 at the now-defunct Polish A.B. Dabrowski Polar Station, in a fascinating 200-square-mile iceless area. At the same time, it was noted that the Russians moved so much equipment and supplies into the oasis that Australian and New Zealand diplomats were convinced they may be setting up permanent air and submarine bases there.
No wonder that one of the most compelling anomalies spotted on satellite images of Antarctica is only 35 miles from the Soviet base, in what appears to many to be a domed metal lid over some sort of underground entrance. In the meantime, no one has even confirmed or fully debunked the suspicions of conspiracy theorists on what this image even shows. Throughout further wide-scale explorations in the 40s and 50s, scientists on military expeditions reported finding ice-free oases with waterfalls cascading down rocky cliffs into dry valleys containing freshwater lakes on the interior of the continent, mountain ranges reaching thousands of feet above icy wastes, fossilized trees, and even the remains of petrified forests. In 1957, the U.S. military acknowledged finding at least 2 other oasis locations in Antarctica only a few hundred miles from the South Pole, both free of ice and large enough to house entire air bases. But the military wouldn't disclose the locations to prevent other nations from potentially establishing bases there. These oases reportedly have a radically different climate from the rest of the continent. Places free of ice and snow where the soil can reach temperatures of 77 degrees Fahrenheit at midday, and warm winds blow over freshwater lakes where strange specimens grow. While transversing the interior, a seismologist gave his account in 1958 of coming across a fresh lake 100 yards across with pinkish flowers growing in the bottom of it, which he could not identify. Experts have concluded these areas could sustain year-round human settlements, yet these highly contrasted landscapes are often difficult to spot when browsing through satellite imagery for whatever reason.
Antarctica's past life as a tropical oasis is further upheld by the discovery of geothermal heated lakes, where almost any form of life could have survived and even continued up until this point, even while the rest of the continent froze over. The Russians at Vostok Station confirmed the discovery of a huge freshwater lake buried nearly 2 miles under the ice cap that they named Lake Vostok. It has attracted a great deal of attention ever since they've successfully drilled through the ice cap and collected active biological samples of living bacteria from a liquid lake that has otherwise been an isolated ecosystem for what scientists claim is as much as 15 million years. Located at the so-called South Pole of Cold, Lake Vostok is nearly as big as Lake Ontario, and at 6,000 square miles in surface area, 160 miles in length, and 30 miles of width, it measures to an astounding depth of more than 2,600 feet at some points, and scientists claim they've found more than 3,500 life forms, as well as rich fossil evidence from a time that they've up until now known nothing about. Even more curious, however, was the confirmed discovery of a huge magnetic anomaly on the east coast of this underground lake that spans a vast 65 by 47 miles. Mainstream scientists hypothesized that a thinning of the Earth's crust at that location caused the anomaly, while others suggested a meteorite hit there, while still others suggest that the dimensions of such a significant magnetic anomaly could signify a lost city on the shores of the underground lake. With so much secrecy shrouding Antarctica, do you think the public would be told if something were found there? Interestingly, it parallels the plot to the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. Scientists on the moon unearth a vast tychomagnetic anomaly that proves to be a monolithic signal device from an unseen extraterrestrial race. Hundreds of these subglacial lakes are known to exist, and most remain still unexplored. However, when scientists drilled into the ice cap of a much shallower and smaller subglacial lake known as Lake Willans, they found living jellyfish, crustaceans, and even 8-inch translucent pink fish, and what they said was an old ecosystem eroding from the ice hovering above the lake. These finds and more continue to fuel speculation, as they have over the past century, that Antarctica is holding on to secret links to mankind's past, and possibly the remnants of ancient civilizations which could have resided there in warmer times.
Despite the appearance of being completely peaceful and solely dedicated to international cooperative scientific research, and despite the public being repeatedly told for decades that Antarctica officially holds, quote, no military value, the massive continent and its surrounding islands in the polar region are of great strategic significance. The place doesn't just lay idle and ownerless. And this surrounds perhaps the biggest secret of Antarctica, an open and rather obvious one. The 1959 Antarctic Treaty, signed by a dozen nations that include the U.S., Argentina, Australia, Chile, New Zealand, Norway, Russia, France, and the United Kingdom, put in place the appearance of a harmonious international atmosphere where Cold War hostilities are rejected and peace is permanent. But in reality, major military forces remain embedded there, outwardly serving as the custodians of man's activities on the continent. And it remains true with now 53 signatories. Significantly, the 1959 treaty immediately followed the 1957-1958 International Geophysical Year, which organized dozens of nations to participate in the Antarctic and other parts of the globe to establish permanent scientific bases and conduct unprecedented exploration and experimentation. The recommendation to make 5758 an IGY event was initiated by astrophysicist Dr. James Van Allen, who was working with the Navy to test his developing theories about the geomagnetic forces that surround the planet, including the intense bands of harmful radiation that bear Van Allen's name. Meteorologist and Navy contractor Harry Wexler was working closely on this research as well, and was appointed chief U.S. scientist for the International Geophysical Year, which created a dual pretext for upper atmosphere tests and weather experiments that served both military and scientific interests, and for creating a permanent military backbone that could provide continuous support for bases, transport, and logistics.
The main job that faced the Seabees during the second year at Antarctica was the building of 5 new bases. Each of these stations would supply vital information to the various scientific projects of the IGY program.
Science gave the U.S., Russia, and Great Britain's military the justification needed for a permanent mission in the South Pole.
Operation Deep Freeze was commenced by the U.S. in 1955, 2 years before the International Geophysical Year, sending thousands of naval and Air Force troops, as well as militarized construction units from the Navy Seabees, to carve out permanent bases to support the scientific effort.
In less than 1 month, pilots of EX-6 mapped and photographed over 1 million square miles of territory.
Operation Deep Freeze created a never-ending permanent mission for the military amid a climate of international cooperation. The opportunity for cover and secrecy was astounding. In proposing the bases, members of the U.S. National Security Council forced an improbable merger between their national military goals and the International Geophysical Year program, silencing early opposition from the scientific community via the recognition that a military-backed mission, channeled through the National Science Foundation, would bring nearly unlimited funds for the projects they had championed, albeit at the cost of quietly acknowledging that parallel military activities were taking place largely in secret.
The activities of Operation Deep Freeze 1, the Glacier, with Admiral Dufek aboard, made a notable cruise around the Antarctic continent. The purpose of this voyage was to locate suitable sites for more IGY stations to be established in later operations. The Glacier's cruise around the continent brought Deep Freeze 1 to a successful conclusion.
Under the treaty, territorial claims are not addressed, though new claims are prohibited. With the status quo on ice, the U.S., British, and Russian installations remain like Antarctica's other secrets, frozen from political interference. But this form of peace can be deceiving and belie anything lurking just beneath the surface. With the treaty not taking effect until 1961, Operation Deep Freeze was a huge preemptive military mobilization effort to establish a permanent foothold on the continent. The only real question is, how far did they get?
There have been many rumors about underground bases on Antarctica, but by their very virtue they are difficult to confirm, and as a result, legends, rumors, and imaginations run wild. And yet, there is solid evidence to support the idea that a significant military-industrial complex is indeed embedded underneath Antarctica's icy facade. Most of the early expeditions to Antarctica in the later 1800s and early 1900s were largely concerned with establishing claims and merely surviving the harsh environment. With improved technology, flight became viable, as did ice-breaking ships and specialized vehicles for ice-capped terrain. In the 1920s, U.S. Navy Admiral Richard E. Byrd achieved fame as the first person to fly over both the North and South Poles, though not without controversy. Byrd's first of 5 expeditions to Antarctica from 1928 to 1929 was privately sponsored by backers including the Rockefellers and Fords, seeking uranium, coal, and shale deposits, gold, copper, and other exploitable minerals, as well as locations to establish base camps. Byrd established Little America, among other camps, which was later plunged into the sea by the shifting ice. Byrd's second 1934 to 1935 expedition focused more on weather. Publicly, the expedition was mostly known for Byrd's dramatic wintering in alone at a meteorological station where he nearly died of carbon monoxide poisoning from a poorly vented stove, yet he lived to publish a best-selling account of it. Behind the drama, it was a major effort to study the relationship between seismic activity, geomagnetic forces, atmosphere, and weather. James Van Allen, who discovered the Van Allen radiation belts that bear his name, took part in Byrd's second expedition as assistant to the chief scientist, and later became a driving force in Antarctic weather experimentation, while Byrd helped the U.S. secure its claims there.